Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Thank you to all of you on Zoom in particular who registered for this event. We are very happy that you have joined us. I'm Julija Simas, and I'm here with the esteemed Arielle Guttman. Hello, Arielle.
Hello. As I said before, Kalimera, Apotini Ilada. Good morning from Greece.
Beautiful.
We are recovering from a dust storm
Yes.
and a full moon
and
an eclipse and the Jupiter Uranus and everything else that's come down this April.
Yes, it's been a big April. As we we've gathered to talk about, our favorite subject, really, the Venus star cycle, and in particular, of course, the Gemini star point that's coming up on June the 4th and 5th, in the next 6 weeks away or so. And this time, of course, the star point the Gemini star point is conjunct the north node of Uranus and has been for the last Gemini sort of star points, but this one is the closest one. So as we'll see as we share the slides and so on. So it becomes like I suppose more of a focus point. The next time the Gemini star point happens in 4 years, it will have moved off a little bit of 14 degrees of Gemini. So it's still around there in this kind of process of the next 8-year cycle, really. But, we can look at this kind of timing, and we can just look at the world around us at the moment in chaos, as this kind of perfects in this year 2024. So let me share my screen and we will begin. I'm going to go backwards now and I will get my pointer. There we go. So yes, everyone knows how to contact Ariel, Sophia Venus. As we know, Ariel very much involved with the pivotal book that introduced many to the Venus star cycle and using the Venus star. And of course, the Cosmic Intelligence Agency, which I run, that has very much been part of doing a lot of work with the Venus star, led by myself, in the sense of we've been meeting as a group every 9.5 months since 2017, the Aries retrograde star point. And so this is, as this star point sort of comes into, let's say, action, it's like we're not closing the cycle, but we've done a full cycle together, haven't we, Ariel?
Yeah, 8 years, almost 8 years now. We started in 2017, so we've done almost a full 8-year Venus star progression.
Yes,
which is kind of exciting. Thank you, by the way. When I got the download for the whole Venus star thing and started work on the book, I wasn't sure how it would, translate out there, how it would catch on, what would happen. I just knew this is exciting. And Julie, I have to thank you for being so much a part of the educational process, you and the CIA, for offering these webinars to the world all the time, every time there's a star point change, gathering together an excellent panel of astrologers, to the few that really know in depth about the Venus star point. We're hoping to get more and more as time goes on. Yes. So we hope that you will study it and join our growing team of Venus star point practitioners.
Yes, thank you, Ariel. It's been a great pleasure to learn with yourself and Gemini Brett, Adam Gainsberg. Mostly the four of us have done most of them together. So anyway, but let's just begin. Why is the Venus star point so important, Ariel?
Because I call it the heartbeat of the world, of the cosmos, actually. And it's a star clock operating behind the zodiac. Most people are not aware of it. We are aware of all the other planets moving around, the new and full moons, the eclipses, the outer planets for sure. Where is Saturn? Where is Pluto? But we don't always know, in fact, very few people know that there is another mechanism working behind the scenes called this Venus star. And I do feel that it is the heart and it is love which keeps the world alive and thriving, because we hear so much on the news and we see so much, from the media, which chooses to report all the negative things that are happening, all the violence and disturbances in the world. But we wouldn't still be here if it weren't for the heartbeat of love operating behind, because it is the force of creation, that of magnetism. Venus is magnetic as she brings, that energy to her for creation and fertility and birth. And it's very important in the birth and the dying, the life and death cycles, let's say, of important events in our lives concerning love, concerning important steps that we take in our own personal evolutionary journey. And the evolutionary journey in this case is to the heart. And I think that's the most important thing we can be doing on the planet right now.
Yes.
Is learning how to have a heart and use it in all of our decision-making process. So the other thing I would say about it is, because the way I got the Venus star, it can be measured. The 5-pointed star Venus can be measured from any place in the zodiac, really, as long as you stay consistent with the starting point and where you're measuring it from. And so I considered the retrograde point, the direct point, but finally I decided to, the heliacal rising point, which was, a lot of people were talking about that before. But the reason I settled on the Cazimi is it is such a magnificent event. It's the light of the sun and the love, or the heart of Venus, coming together in a Cazimi as close as possible, called the kiss of Venus, penetrating its energy to the earth, the body, our body. And so it seemed to me, and also you could time it. You can have an exact time of that event anywhere in the world, down to the second. Whereas the heliacal rise is a little bit more, it could be a
Well, it's
day
the
off, it could be a week
location.
off.
It's all about
Yeah,
location and where you are
yeah,
on the planet, because at the moment, in the next few days, well, typically Venus will be disappearing behind the light of the sun for about 80 days, really. But
I know. Isn't it interesting that we're doing this just as Venus is disappearing from the
yes,
morning
yes.
sky?
So Gemini, this morning I saw a quick, he did a long version. I couldn't watch it all, but reminding us that, of course, Venus is rising through the constellation of Pisces, right? Being in Aries, but in Pisces. So
Yeah.
Pisces is a crooked sign in the northern hemisphere, but in the southern hemisphere, it rises very straight up. So we can still see Venus in Melbourne for the next, week, whereas she's disappeared in California. So this is,
Right.
again, what you're saying is that's why we use the Venus star point exactness to
Yeah.
determine the clock, because otherwise it's very different. Of course, you can do it the other way, but it's all about the location then, right? So this is a much more
Yeah.
sort of mundane gathering of the star point, in a sense. Yeah.
Yes. And for our purposes, it works because we're charting exact moments of, start from star point to star point. But I don't deny the magic, the beauty, and the power of watching a heliacal rise of
Yes.
Venus, or a heliacal set of Venus. So if you are sky watchers and you are integrating your energy with the living sky, I think it's really important in terms of a ceremonial and embodiment practice to undergo,
Yeah.
to feel the star within you, because I think this is an embodiment practice too. If you see the little figure there in the bottom right hand of the slide, this little starman that I had created for the book, it's I do a mudra with that, with the outstretched arms and the legs. It's on my YouTube channel, where you're actually sending the energy and creating a 5-pointed star in your body. And believe me, I think that's a very potent mudra to
Would get
do,
the
and
energy
I encourage
working.
people. Yeah, it
Mm.
does. It brings Venus right into you, you
Yeah,
know.
right. And of course, the symbol of Venus is about, the manifesting spirit onto Earth. So, it's what we do with it, with this creative, let's say, signature that Venus brings us, which is just amazing to work with. So, we're not going to go through all the sort of technical ways that the Venus star works at this point, because we've done many videos online before, and you can watch on Ariel's Venus Star Point channel or the CIA channel. We have a lot of videos, again, from a long time ago, that you can learn more about how the mechanics of this star works. But pretty much it's a full cycle that happens in 8 years in 5 star points, and every star point has 2 sort of sides, a direct point and a retrograde point. And at this point, we are actually at the 14-degree, or coming towards the 14-degree Gemini point, which is a direct star point. As we said, Venus is about to go behind the sun, and that's where she will do her Cassimi on the outer side of the sun. 4 years ago, we had the same star point, or I think it was 15 degrees of Gemini in 2020 as the retrograde. And then in 4 years' time, again, we're going to have the next star point as the retrograde as well. So a full loop from the same phase relationship. So from retrograde to retrograde will be 8 years in the same sign, and so on. So these are the 5 current star points, as we call them. And we had one loop back into Libra back in 2022, which will repeat in Scorpio. So this is the transition star point that we're in. Again, there's a lot of information about that we've talked about already. 2 years ago, it happened just before the Queen died, didn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So every star point
Yeah.
has a signature, has a theme, has an incredible sort of sequence that repeats a pattern. And of course, we're looking at it more in a mundane point of view at this in this webinar. But of course, you can adapt this to your own life, and see where these 5 points are in your zodiac, in your astrology chart. I mean, they'll be in the same place in the zodiac, but seeing it move in your lifetime is quite incredible. So this is the AstroSeek model, which is just fantastic in the sense of really sort of following. I mean, we used to create these slides over the years, and then this one came out and it's like, well, we don't need to make them anymore. This is just like, it's perfect.
We cannot match the beauty and precision of this.
No, because it shows the rows, it shows the 5 points, it shows
we don't need to.
Yeah, it shows the in points and the out points. So if we're concentrating now, this is the point we're concentrating on here, F3. And then in 4 years ago, it was here as the retrograde point. So in between, sorry, here, this is the sun, the retrograde point between the sun and the earth. This is now the outer conjunction point. But as you can see, this is exactly lined up. Earth, Sun, Venus lined up, just in different sort of scenario, like eclipse points, really, a solar eclipse and then in a sense, a lunar eclipse. So you can get this chart, or take a screen grab and, follow the lines, and you'll get a really good idea of how it works. And then I've just drawn the star in there, really, so that, from this point we go inwards, then we go out to an outer, we go into a retrograde, we go out again, we go in again, we go out again. Then by the time we come back here, we're in again, out again, in again, out again. And so again, you get this sense that this is this eternal pattern and cycle repeating, coming back to the same area of the zodiac, focusing a point, making a point, in the same area, and slowly over years, moving 2 degrees backwards in an 8-year cycle, or something like that. It does hover a bit in the outer conjunction points. So get to know this cycle. We're not going to, again, spend a lot of time on it. So I just wanted to point out again, this is the graph from AstroSeek and the table that you can also get for all the sort of appearances and disappearances in a whole 19-month cycle of Venus. And, you know, you can see she's about to set here. This isn't in a general level as well, okay? So that she will be setting, going behind the sun, where, well, into the sun's beams where we won't see her until 10-week period when she comes out around the 10th of July. Now, this is really, really interesting for me because many people focus on the retrograde point, the 40 days and 40 nights of the retrograde. And retrogrades are important. I'm not saying they're not. But the Venus and the sun quickly move off each other, let's say, because Venus is slow, the sun overtakes, and they've come apart, let's say. Whereas when Venus is heading where she is now, there will be 20 days and 20 nights before the exact conjunction that Venus is traveling with the sun within 5 degrees. And, you know, this was sort of something I thought about and went, okay, well, that means Venus is the only planet that travels that long with the sun. No other, which makes it really also, you know, these 40 days and 40 nights of the outer conjunction, which, as we know, Ariel is also very much the shamanic astrologer's version of Venus in the underworld. Now, when she disappears, Venus has gone longer, and therefore this is the period that is looked at where Venus is gone for a lot longer as the underworld journey, not the retrograde. And I think that's very interchangeable, Ariel. We've done a lot of work.
That's an amazing correspondence. For that, the evening star does a 40-day thing too.
Yes. Well, within the 5 degrees. So this is
within 5 degrees, which people call combust. But
because Venus is moving really fast.
Again, when I was researching this for the writing I was doing in the book, I was thinking 40 days, okay, 40 days Jesus spent in the desert, 40 days of the flood of Noah, 40 days of Lent, 40 days. And then I started thinking, so I Googled it, you know, what kind of things have a 40-day increment? Basically it was like 100, more than 100 references, even in the Old Testament, to 40 days this, 40 days that. And I thought, what are they, you know, why did this 40-day period become so important in all the ancient religious texts and practices, not just the Old Testament Judaism, but many other religions too have 40-day practices. And I started having me think about that it has to do with Venus. It has to do with Venus and the sun. So there you are.
Yeah, there it is. And of course, you know, they say that if you're going to start a new practice or you're going to take a new sort of medicine or whatever, you need 40 days to let it see if it's going to work the way you'd like. I mean, I know things can work a lot quicker, especially, you know, like getting rid of a headache or something. But, you know, if you're taking something more homeopathically or something a bit more intuitively, then, you know, you need that time. So anyway, that's just really something to keep in mind and really treat this time of the disappearance and then the importance of the outer conjunctions being just as significant as a retrograde point. That's what I'd like to point out as well.
And that's the point you're making.
That's the point I'm making. So
anyway, and it's a good point. It's a very good point.
Yes, and I don't hear of many people talking about it at all. So anyway, it's just very important for me. And because I've seen the star point, people born with a Venus, let's say in the underworld at the outer conjunction point, having much or as significant trials in their life to do with betrayal or abuse or, you know, significant relationship battles, their Venus is not retrograde. And it is quite an overwhelming transit that can happen. So if you haven't done the homework, have a look at all the the times that Venus has gone behind the sun and see what your life has been like at the time. For me, I find it quite overwhelming, and there's lots to do, and it's like, you know, trying to get something. It's like having a big Jupiter transit. It's like Venus is moving so fast, you've got to keep up. You know, there's a lot to kind of you know, do with the mission, let's say. That's what I'd like to say.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
these are
yeah.
all the years that we've had a Gemini star point just in the last 24. Okay, so that when we look at these dates, you know, the year 2000, that was a significant date in the sense of the turn of the millennium. 2004, social media began, or Facebook did, and then there was a whole trial of things. This was also the transit year. 2008, I think Bitcoin was born, the GFC happened soon, you know, kind of revolved after that. 2012, as we know, 16, 20, and so on. So we'll talk a bit more about that now. But so Venus, I just called you Venus, Ariel. Ariel, of course, has
Thank
got
you.
this. That's easy to do. So, of course, on Ariel's website, there is a Venus Star Point PDF that you can download to actually look through the ephemeris and, you know all the star points. But of course, software will do that for you as well. So depends
Yeah,
on how tooled up you are, let's say. So
yeah. I wanted to make a comment here when
yeah,
you're finished with what you're going to
no,
say,
that's you.
because I like providing this slide for an important reason, well, a couple of important reasons. People, in astrology, the only way to really learn astrology, there used to be a book called that, The Only Way to Learn Astrology.
No,
But for me, the only way to learn astrology is to look at where planets are in any given time period and how they are affecting your own chart or somebody else's chart, because that's the living example of how astrology is coming down to earth and integrating into your lives. And so it was following this pattern that you can see, as Julia highlighted, 2012, 2016, 2020, those are all Gemini star points. But it also follows a pattern of Gemini, Aries, Capricorn, Scorpio, Leo. Then it comes back to Gemini, Aries, Capricorn, Scorpio, Leo. So you see it's the same sequence going, repeating over and over until the sign changes. And we're about halfway through. See the 15 degrees Gemini, around 14 degrees Gemini. We're about halfway through the sign, because it starts at 29. It moves backwards like the nodes, or retrograde. The Venus star does, and it starts at 29. And it began in 1964. This Gemini star point began for the first time in our lifetime in 1964. And it runs all the way until 2072 for a full 108 years, which is a sacred number. And for a total of 28 passes, 28 heartbeats in Gemini every 4 years for 108 years. So it becomes a sign of the times, what I call, this is, no other planet is doing this. Pluto, Saturn, whatever, they come and go out of signs for a brief period, and then they're gone for a longer period. But no other planet does this for such an extension of time, where it comes back and reminds you, okay, look back 4 years ago, look back 8 years ago, look forward 4 years. And so anybody that has planets or important points in Gemini, or I would extend that to mutable signs in the upper half of the signs, like from 15 to 29, you've already had the Gemini star passing over that planet. So look up that date, that year, and see what was the important synchronicity that happened between the Venus star point of that date and your planet, and how did that change your life? And then for the lower degrees of Gemini people coming up in the next 50 years or so, it's going to be the
The
you know,
early
it's still to
degrees of
come.
Gemini.
You know, it's
Mm.
like you're still waiting for it. It's incubating, and it will be born in the future.
Yeah,
So
it's an incredible exercise to do, isn't it? Of course, that's what we do in our workshops as well. Well, I do as well, to make people go, and you just see aha moments, going off everywhere. But we've learned a lot by doing that with people, haven't we, Ariel? Sort of hearing
yeah,
the stories of, this is what happened to me, and so on. So this is the star point here, just in the zodiac here, 14 degrees 29 of Gemini. This is just an Aries chart, but that's focusing this sort of phase or this star point for you somewhere at 14 Gemini. And again, think about the 20 degrees before and the 20 degrees after, okay, as sort of part of the story, and kind of focusing in on the 14 Gemini. Is there anything we'll talk about this later, but I just wanted to introduce, what the chart of the of this Cazimi is.
yeah. Well, I would point out that I do like to, in astrological consultations, I find this pretty meaningful too. You don't have to go too far with your point about where the star point is, because the person gets it right away. They get why it's so meaningful in their life. And if for some reason they don't draw a correspondence from it right away, I always take the star point in its aspects as you have here, but also I think the ruling planet of the star point is so, so important. And in this case, it's Gemini. And so I did a little bit of an inventory since 2004, the first Venus transit, and Mercury, the star point Gemini ruler, was in Gemini every single time except for 2 years, except for two times. One of them was 2016 when Mercury was in Taurus.
Right.
And we know what happened in 2016 there. Of course, we have elections every 4 years. So we had Mercury in Taurus, then at 22 Taurus opposite Mars, which was at 26 Scorpio. And then in 2020, we had Mercury in Cancer at 7 degrees Cancer, and Chiron was at 8 degrees Aries. So we know what happened in 2020. Mercury was square Chiron exactly, and we were all wearing masks.
Yeah, right,
And
right.
we were all dealing with the world pandemic. So Chiron, the wounded healer. But most of the time,
And
Mercury
staying
will be in
home.
Gemini, you
Staying
know?
home in
But
Cancer.
yeah, but this time Cancer. Oh, staying at home and
Yes.
giving people who were using Zoom a lot of practice at getting to use Zoom. I remember how my clients changed. Before 2020, I would say, because astrologers were using Zoom and
Yeah.
some of this,
Yeah.
video technology, of course, for our webinars and things. And so before 2020, I would say to a client, well, would you like to meet on Zoom? And what is Zoom? How do I
Yeah,
do that?
okay.
And after 2020, I would say, I'd like to meet on Zoom. And they go, oh, yeah. And they all knew how to do it.
Well, it really
So it
amped
was
up
a
our
crash course in
connections.
Zoom.
Yeah. It very much amped up our connections, which is very Geminian, of course, and communicating. It didn't
Right.
stop us communicating, but we were online. So, yeah, anyway, you find amazing connections all the time. So, again, just a brief sort of look, what does Gemini mean? It is all about awareness, communication, information, learning. As we know everything, what Gemini means, but we do see it very connected to environmental stuff like COVID in a sense, right? Like what's going on around us. Air quality pollution can kind of rear its head in a sense. The gathering of data. I mean, we're told that data is the new gold, right? It is the most valuable thing that can be sourced from, corporations and governments and so on. And there's many ways that we're, very skeptical or concerned about how that is going to be done in the future. anyway, there's so many things that can be added here, you know, and scenarios that then will lead us into, you know, being swiped before we go into not supermarkets, into shopping centers, you know, so your ID is actually kind of in more places more often, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, that kind
The
of
other
thing.
thing is everything's going viral. We didn't have that term going viral until the heated moments, which the most heated moments of the Gemini Star Point, which I think were the twin transits,
Yeah,
but you know,
yeah,
post 2012.
yeah,
And then the virus came in 2020, which went viral. And
yes,
then we had a really good idea of what that meant to go viral, because it's sort of like this little invisible microbial thing that you can't even see, and suddenly the whole world is
everywhere.
down,
Yeah,
shut down like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
So we have to watch for invisible, I mean, there are things going on in that invisible microbial world that we don't really know about, that are affecting everyday speech and everyday
yeah.
communications as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I did hear from a Polish astrologer once that told me, you know, how like just generally we associate the sixth house with domestic animals or small animals, the 12th house with large animals and beasts and so on. And the
Yeah,
Polish
yeah.
astrologer told me that the ninth house is birds, okay, and that the third house is insects and things, and you know, small things we don't see. So very much connected to, you know, the environment. Like, anyway, I just found that so interesting. So anyway, but also
Yeah.
all kinds of issues of, you know, polarity, dark and light, you know, me and you, you know, I mean, there's so many things in all the air signs in that sense. But you know, in Gemini, we're kind of led to connect the dots or think harder about information that is coming through. And look, these days, I was having conversation with two friends last night. I mean, it's so hard to decipher. If we, you know, we have to have our news channels that we trust, right? Because there's so
Mhm.
much rubbish circulating. So Gemini very much represents that deciphering of the information that is coming into us. I know that's a very Virgo word, but still, it's mercurial. So these are kind of the,
Well, yeah, it's connected to Gemini. It's a
yeah,
very important concept. You know, Virgo has to be taken into consideration.
yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah, yeah. How we discern what's going on, yeah, for sure. And of course, you know, the rise of conspiracy theories and, you know, again, how much of that circulates and influences people, influences influencing people, social media, and it's you know, its role in how it does, you know, propagate propaganda and elections and all that kind of stuff, which we saw very strongly in 2016 during the Trump elections. So let's just
Mhm.
have a look down this kind of list here. So starting in 2004, the transits of Venus, 2004 and 2012, we are the things that make the Gemini star point most significant in a sense, because it's on the nodes of Venus or near the nodes of Venus. Exactly during the transit, it was exactly on the nodes of Venus. So the Gemini star points are still very close to there. But the star points and what happened in between 2004 and 2008 was our whole new world of social media, wasn't it? And you know, the
Yeah,
connecting of us and the rise of the internet, the rise of everything that we do these days, which is just normal. It's just amping up so much more, right? As I was saying, 2008, the GFC kind of was prompted at the end of 2008. Bitcoin started under, let's say, the Gemini star point phase in January 2009. Now, what you got to think about with the star points and what we see is it's not about, it's like eclipses, that things don't happen in relation to the eclipses right on that date, like June the 5th. They're gathering, you know, kind of the information. And this is what I always sort of let people or make sure people understand, is that it's a focal point. Okay, so it doesn't happen have to happen in June, right? We can see the things happening before then. Anyway, the GFC made us very aware of mistrust of banking systems, government systems. There's a few spelling mistakes there, I'm sorry. But and then, 2012 was a huge year in the sense of, awareness and transparency and the 1% occupation sort of movements. Again, the influences of social media, I think with the, things like the Arab Spring and, how it can rise up and rally people together. Obama was re-elected, and if we go down, and of course, Ariel, as you said, these are the election years as well for the USA. So it is the frenzy of of the two-sided, what ends up being, the two sides of who we're going to vote for, right?
Information mania
Yeah,
and information to the point of absolute, you want to
mayhem.
turn everything off. By the time the election gets here, it's like you've had so much
Yeah,
information, misinformation, and following it. If you're following it on a day-to-day or hour by hour, um,
yeah,
way, it's
it's
mind-boggling.
crazy, isn't
And
it?
in fact, it was the 24-hour news cycle that was born under the Gemini Star Point 2 era, because we didn't have that. We didn't used to have that.
Okay.
When I was a child, you had morning news, you had evening news, but you didn't have this
Yes.
all day long.
Yeah. And what year was
Unless it
that,
was a
did you say?
special, we have to break into this program and give you a special report, like the
Yep.
president has just been assassinated or something. But it was only very important events that would break into, and it's sort
Main
of
news.
like forcing its way into our mind now 24 hours a day. Even people sleep is disturbed because these little messages come over their phones, like what's going on here, breaking news, this. So there is that. And all of these events that you've gathered together are, really amazing when you look back at how many of
Yeah.
these things. But
Yeah.
one of the things I was noticing about Gemini star points in particular, it is information, but every 4 years when the star points in Gemini, um, also the populations of the world are way more vocal.
Mm-hmm.
There is so much more noise in terms of whether it's
Speaking out.
protest or whatever. They're speaking their mind, they're putting it out there. They're sometimes they're so angry, they're screaming or they're throwing bricks through buildings or whatever, or setting things on fire. But there's a general feeling of disturbance, and because Gemini is the need to air things out. Okay, it is an air sign and it is about communication. So
Yes.
when you have this powerful set of energies, especially when Mercury's there too, for the star point, it creates a 9-month period where there's so much vocal activity. And you had mentioned to me the other day you had reminded me about 2020, when with the George Floyd
Yeah, I've
murder
got a
and all
slide
the
that of that in a
protests that
minute.
happened
Yeah.
as a result of that. But look at just what I heard the other day was that, I don't know, this is happening around the world, but major campuses in the US, college campuses, are
I saw that.
protesting the Gaza, in the things that are going on in Gaza right now, the genocide, so
Free
vocally and
Palestine.
so,
Hmm.
that the whole Palestine, Israeli-Palestinian issues. And there is so much pressure now and so many people protesting along college campuses. And this is where, you think of Gemini, I think of Gemini as students,
It's a learning
people who
place.
are
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a place of learning. And so their
Mm.
minds are attuned to what's going on. And that's when we feel the most inside of us to speak out about anything
Yeah.
really in life. But it's happening again, and it's going to affect the college campus situation, um, in a very big way, I believe, in the coming years. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. I mean, hopefully you've been reading the things, but things like Brexit was in this cycle. Julian
Yeah.
Assange being sort of going to the Ecuadorian embassy, and then Edward Snowden as well back in 2012. And of course, every 12 years it locks in with the Jupiter in Gemini cycle as well. So, we've got that sort of, hugeness of Jupiter in Gemini as well in the 12-year cycles. And then of course, the COVID, the 2020, we were like, again, you said, wearing masks, we can't breathe. Breathing is all about the lungs, and the virus was the lungs. There was just so many sort of great big symbols of
Gemini,
this.
all Gemini.
Yeah, and then really trying to sort of sift the information was just, mind-boggling about who to listen to, who was telling the truth, who was anyway, as we know, that's the, a big story there. And then, 4 years later, here we are. And it's interesting to find things that the Bitcoin halving happens every 4 years. It just halved again. We have Assange, who launches his final appeal just recently for his extradition to the USA. Again, there's much recall happening here. I know in Australia about companies and suing the government and the Victorian government, because we had a very strong lockdown here in 2020 and businesses going broke and all that kind of stuff. Well, the elites could keep doing their stuff, right? And were caught at, parties like Boris was, all that kind of stuff. We're told,
Right.
as we know, the very sort of unproportioned sort of way of allowing things to happen. And then, of course, the rise of AI, very prominent now, and especially with what we'll talk about in a second. But also, just the other day, the aid that was given, the USA was. Everyone was waiting to hear about if it would be given for Ukraine, and, weapons for Ukraine and weapons for Israel, and, aid to Taiwan. And I just love this word bipartisan. The Senate had to come together to agree, two opposing sides having to come together to agree on this, which they were doing for ages. So anyway, that's also spelt wrong. So anyway, we can see these very big symbolic kind of things coming to our, into focus. And this is what Ariel was saying before, the "I can't breathe" was the line that George Floyd said, when the policeman sort of stepped on his neck. It was the end of May, actually, just before the Star Point. But at the same time, we are wearing masks and, again, with things like, well, I can't breathe. I remember I couldn't breathe. I had to take my glasses off, when
Right. Our glasses were fogging up. We
yeah,
couldn't
glasses
see.
fogging
Not only
up.
couldn't we speak through the
Yeah,
mask or hear
yeah,
other people through
exactly.
the
And so
muffle, we
isolated.
couldn't see because our glasses.
Yeah. So what that shows us is that Venus is very much about the cultural shifts, of course, the values that are going on. Everyone's connected to them, right? Everyone somehow is connected to these cultural changes. So it's really quite significant. So Ariel, this is now your slide in regard to more about the US election sort of cycle in this Gemini phase.
Yeah, it was a kind of a revelation to me when I started studying the Venus star pattern that every 4 years, when the Gemini star point comes back into being, that there is a US presidential election. Of course, before Gemini, it was the Cancer VSP, because Gemini is a continuation of the Cancer star as it's moving backwards through the zodiac. But that was 100-year period when it was in Cancer, where the country was really electing more or less father figures and people who, important times during World War II, World War I, it was all cancer, how to keep how to keep us safe, and all of that. The Gemini star point, when it came in, first of all, I think that was the big switch from what I really feel is true now, that the media has way more influence in who is elected than anything else.
Yeah.
Even the debates, even, you know, the choice of candidates. It's like how much attention the media chooses to give a certain candidate. And the incredible thing about Trump, whether you like him or don't like him, and he is somebody who inspires that kind of polarity in people. He is a Gemini with the Uranus in the North Node conjunct his Sun. But on the North Node of Uranus is that the media has not kept that name, that word, Trump, out of its mouth or out of its news since 2015, when he announced his candidacy. And there hasn't been one day that has gone by since then that we haven't heard that word and that we haven't seen his presence. So as I said, like it or not, all of his Gemini energy, which is right there along the North Node of Uranus, has gone a long way to, you know, keep him in the public eye, whether you love him or hate him. He's, you know, he's attracting an enormous, he has an enormous power. It's almost, I think of those Star Trek episodes where they're putting out a tractor beam. You know, it's a tractor beam pulling you in. You know, it's like he's got this amazing tractor beam of energy that just makes everybody aware of everything he's doing all the time, everything he's saying, everything he's thinking, everything, you know. So that's another example of the elections. And I would say choose your media sources carefully. And also, if you find that your certain media platforms are not reporting things the way you would like them to, let them know. I mean, your voice is your most powerful tool. You could call it a weapon, you could call it a tool, especially during these Gemini points, because it's like, you know, this is what we have to say. And the thing we have to be careful of, because a lot of things that are said in anger, and then it's written off as, oh, well, you know, it's just the angry mob or whatever, we're going to get rid of them. But we want intelligent discourse. We're looking for intelligent, well-researched discourse. And I picked this up. This is really from the MAGA campaign, but they were protesting that the media is deciding the election. And I just happen to agree with that point.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many things. Anyway, oh gosh. So I've just put in the USA chart here, and I've got the other version with the nodes of Uranus there. But you know, so for the USA, using the Sibley chart, the Venus star point is happening in the 7th house. Again, they've just given over all this aid, although they always do. And it's in trine to Saturn here. Ariel, what do you kind of see about that? And then of course the nodes are right on, you know, it's all aligned with the nodes and Saturn in that sense.
Well, I actually like the trine to Saturn, and Saturn's in the US chart anyways, in its exaltation position. Jupiter's in its exaltation position in Cancer. There are some strong factors in this chart for sure. But I think the next VSP, I mean, between now and 2028, the next Gemini VSP, which is 11 Gemini, the Sibley chart is 12 Sag.
Yes.
So we really right now in this next 12-year period, we're like, it's really hitting the United States in a big way. And of course, the 7th house is not only alliances and partners, it's open enemies. And there is, you know, Uranus right on the cusp, Mars in the house. There's a lot of going to be supporters and detractors from the United States as there is now, and there will be actually even more of in the coming in the
as
coming
that
years.
point gets over the descendant more. Anyway, it's already there, but so just another thing to keep an eye out on. And just in Australia,
if you go back to that chart for 1 second, I just wanted to say the ruling planet, again, of Gemini Star Point is Mercury at 2 Gemini. But look at Jupiter. It's
Yes.
tightly conjunct
Yeah.
Jupiter this year. So I think
What's the
that's
truth?
also helpful. That's helpful for a lot of us in a lot of ways.
Okay. To
Yeah.
get the truth from deciphering
Yeah.
everything. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. I think so. And I think the higher courts or the laws that Jupiter
Might make some
makes is,
intelligent.
something that can lead us towards progress and something, something good can come from that conjunction, I believe,
Yeah.
you know.
Fantastic. Yeah. Okay. Good. Thanks for pointing that out. So in Australia, again, the whistleblowers of 2012, Snowden, Assange, and the repeating of that in Australia just recently. Well, again, some things that have been happening for a while. Let me just see that. This man, gosh, what's his name now? Oh, David McBride. He exposed military documents to the ABC media back in 2016. And he's currently fighting all of, the law courts about his kind of fate for doing that. But again, another whistleblower, what do you call it, exposing war crimes of generals in the Australian Army in Afghanistan. Back, it was back in 2000, I don't know, 14 or something, no, even earlier. But anyway, his story is very big here at the moment. And his book has come out, and there's a lot of, campaigns or whatever on his behalf. And, freedom of speech, that's very Gemini or Jupiter Gemini as well. And again, returning to that. And then also an Australian journalist, Yang Henguin, sentenced to death for spying in China. And we just heard about this in the last month or so. And here we can see, I don't have a birth time, but we can see that this star point is squaring his Pluto. And his node is actually right on this Gemini star point. So again, very much in this, again, the news is really reflecting, what this 14 degrees of Gemini in people's charts.
Yeah, and that Uranus North Node too. So he had a
Yeah,
bigger part to play in the world in
yeah,
terms
very
of,
much, very much.
when you've got that 14-degree Gemini, you do have the North Node of Uranus and Venus, which is really close by, in permanent positions
Activated.
there for us.
Yeah.
You do have a bigger role to play in the world.
Well, I'm going to talk about that a bit more. And then the Queen of Denmark, who abdicated earlier this year, I think it was January, it's really interesting to note that her Venus is at 14 Gemini as well. But anyway,
yeah.
yeah. So again, we see, again, things that happen in the news or to people, I kind of always look where 14 Gemini is, because I know that's the approaching kind of point, and that will be significant somehow. And then, of course, it's the AI kind of experience that we're all living through at the moment. It's just ramping up so big. And it's really interesting because, AI generates images, text, human voices, and videos. So we can replicate a lot of these things that we do. It can make a clone of ourselves, right? As we know, we're all tested, what we look like in AI and stuff. But interestingly, AI can't create letters, words, or fingers in an image, that is, in an image. So I think that, that's just so interesting.
That's pretty
Of course,
interesting.
yeah,
I
yeah,
wonder
yeah.
why.
Yeah, yeah. Well, again, that makes it's just so interesting. So AI, of course, people work with AI assistants, AI movies are done, voiceovers, things that we don't even realize are being done in AI now are AI. And very, very quickly, it's just amped up. I mean, that's just so Uranus, isn't it? The North Node of Uranus. Like, where is this coming from?
Yeah.
The other day, I just saw, using fake food photos for delivery apps. So it's not even what the food looks like. It can be just looking like a magnificent, thing. It's nothing like what you're going to get. For architecture, house sales as well, right? Like we've all seen images of incredible houses that are like, people going, oh, that's beautiful. It's not real, right? Anyway, and the
Or
repercussions.
vacation rentals. What you think you're getting is not at all what you're getting.
Well, don't buy online for your, things like that anyway. And so, I
Yeah,
mean, that's very much also reflected with Venus on the north node of Uranus for this particular timing, but also, of course, Pluto in Aquarius, which is the much bigger story in all of this as well. The
yes.
dystopia of what we're living in and how how we're going to process all this. And this is really interesting. This just happened on March the 21st, was that Google introduced their own chat version called Gemini, like AI chat being called Gemini. And then I saw this ad the other day, in a sense of astro-powered AI prompts for better copywriting, meaning that, you can hook up to this service and get your ascendant, sun and moon, give them your details of that, and they will copyright your material based on, well, I think it's those three things. Maybe they use Mercury, but they said the top three. Oh my goodness. I mean, we already know, like, what kind of astrology is going on out there as well. And now it will be, people will be using services to, lift their game in a sense, or, whatever, to make it look like that they're doing, astrology. It's a bit
So
disconcerting, isn't it?
is that her real fingers? Or, I mean, did AI create that? Is that a real
No, well,
person
it's
or are
more
those
about,
fake
this is just
fingers?
the ad, but it's more about, they will do your copywriting for you. Like, me and you might sit down and write an article or a post. They will do it for you because of what they
Yeah,
know, that your sun and moon and, whatever, or your astrology chart. So, Jesus, anyway. And so
yeah.
it all comes down to, again, in this, as we're focusing on Venus, is what we value in this world that is just truly gone berserk, in a sense. Like, again, we have to decipher so much. And do we have to do all the things to keep up if they're not sort of part of what we value about things? Again, with what
Hmm.
we use to aid our astrology, let's say. I use AI images because I think it's easier, and it's amazing sort of results and stuff. But a lot of the other things, other people might have other things they use, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and so now this sort of leads us into what, we want to sort of now talk about, is the planetary nodes, and especially that of Uranus. But I suppose we have to understand them a little bit, don't we? So as you say, Ariel, let us tell us about this.
Well, okay, we're not going to take such a deep dive into the nodes. We don't really have time for that
Mm,
today. I myself am just starting to research the planetary nodes, and I have decided to take a deep dive into what they mean and what's coming up, what came up uh, prominently at the first look was that the planetary nodes are really important, and that the Venus Star Point in Gemini, especially right now for our current times, and since about 2012, going forward to about 2028, are right on that Uranus North Node. And also, just last week, we had a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction at 21 Taurus. Well, if we look at the heliocentric nodes, which are fairly fixed positions, Mars and Mercury are sitting at 20 degrees of Taurus Scorpio, and 19 and 20 degrees of Taurus Scorpio. So Jupiter's on
mm,
them now. Uranus has been on them. So there's another, there's, in other words, it's kind of like the Venus star, which is a program playing in the background that you're not aware of behind the planets. The planetary nodes is another program playing in the background behind the planets that we're not aware of.
yeah.
So it's a deeper level of examining how these nodes sort of affect things behind the scenes, and what are, I would call it, unconscious or subconscious promptings. Like, why are we so tuned in to a certain thing? Gee, I don't know why I'm so connected to that. And then we find, oh, Neptune's north node is right on my ascendant. No wonder I'm so tuned into
Yeah.
that particular thing. That's very Neptunian or whatever. So, and you wouldn't think that there's any other thing in your chart that says that, but so it's worth taking a look. And I'm taking a look because, first of all, it's fascinating to me. I always do my own chart first and see what it says, and of course, it all agrees. So, yeah, you've got Julian
Oh,
Assange
hang on,
here,
that's
and
kind of, sorry, out of whack, but hang on. I was just putting these charts up because this is now, there's heliocentric nodes and there's geocentric nodes, which I'll talk about as well. So the heliocentric nodes are, of course, are much more even. They don't change much. They change very little over 150 years, like maybe 1 degree. There's a table coming up. Whereas the geocentric nodes actually are seasonal, as Mark Jones explained to us in a CIA session that he did for us in January, which we'll talk about a bit. But basically, this is the difference. So what we can see is Uranus is at 14 Sagittarius, and this is time for the Venus star point. Okay, so that we've got the helio nodes, 14 Gemini for Uranus, and Venus is just a little bit off because, again, she's not transiting, the sun at this point. She did that a while ago. She's moving off in a sense. And then when we look over here on the left, we still can see that Uranus is at 14. And so the outer planets don't change much, but the Mars, Mercury, Venus will be, what do you call it? Jupiter and Saturn will be a lot more. Yeah, the best way I can explain it is seasonal, because it depends where the sun is and how their nodes will kind of
well,
interact.
it's like that dragon diagram. They go
Yeah.
back and forth,
Yes, and I've got
like a
another one
pendulum,
here.
kind of. Yeah,
Hang on, I'll just show
mhm,
you. I'll go back to
like
those.
that,
But yeah,
right?
so the helio nodes are much more, like they never change. And Mark Jones explained to us that that's the reason he uses the helios, because it's much more of a spiritual sort of connection to the point. But again, it's worth exploring both, and we will be doing that. And then the other nodes, and this is an example of Uranus, how the geo nodes will actually then move around that in more sort of out and in, okay, if that makes sense. And then so this is the graph, a table that shows us the nodes of the planets in a different way, of course. Let me see. Yeah, so they're the heliocentric ones. Did you want to read anything out about this here?
Oh, no, I think that was Mark Jones who wrote that. But that's what we just said, that they
Yeah,
show a
okay.
rather
Yeah,
slow progression for the outer planets. And I just wanted to highlight my observations over
yeah,
here. And I've already said that, really, how Venus and Uranus have been slowly moving through Gemini side by side for centuries. Notice how Mercury and Mars have been slowly moving through Taurus side by side for centuries. And this year is pretty big because we had the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction on the nodes of Mercury and Mars,
yeah,
and the VSP now is on the nodes of Venus and Uranus. So it's like, again, background, what's behind the scenes, what's going on behind the scenes, that I think, and Mars. Oh, the other thing
sorry.
about Mars,
Yeah,
because it was Uranus and Jupiter on the Mars, Mercury, Mars, we know Mars is a kind of stirs up things. It's a war god. It was looked at as the war god, Aries. So, we have two really big wars going on in the world right now that are polarizing the planet, the people that are involved or invested in either side. And I also find that Mercury and Mars are interesting from a philosophical point of view in Taurus and Scorpio, because it's sort of like Mercury's the messenger and Mars is the action. And it's sort of like what moves the world in a certain way is transactions and merchandise and money and goods and
yeah,
services and
yeah,
imports and exports and getting food to from this side of the world over to that side of the world, or even from this side of the country to that side of the country. But it's all about commerce and trade and all of
yeah,
that. And it
yeah,
has a lot to do with the economy. Taurus, Scorpio.
Yeah, and also, I mean, just reflecting on last year, 2023, December, when Mars started its new synodic cycle, it was on its node as well. So that's kind of
Yeah.
interesting for these times as well.
Yeah, well,
looking,
Mars is making its presence felt in this
yeah.
current timeline for sure.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, for me with the nodes, the more you get to know them and you know that, that the heliocentric ones are, of course, easier to remember, right? And that, the Jupiter nodes are on the axis of 9 Capricorn Cancer. You kind of, when you see them, it's like a Venus star point. Ah, that's the node of Jupiter, right? So when you see something at 9 Cancer or whatever, and so on. So, again, I'm kind of noticing all that more and more because I've been studying this and been very sort of excited about it. And then this is again from Mark's tables. This is the heliocentric nodes showing us how they move, how far they move, in 150 years. And then the range that we find for, for the geocentric nodes. So you can see that, how that changes. And again, Mark's preference is using the helio nodes. If you haven't seen his book, oh, that's not coming up in my picture. Anyway, I'll show
It's
it to you.
called Planetary Nodes.
On the
I've just
planetary
bought a
node.
copy of it in London. I'm so happy to have it.
Yeah, it's got some great examples in there. So we're sort of just touching on things. And of course, when we did have the webinar with him, we noted to him that Venus, Uranus, the Venus point is on Uranus. And of course, we've got a lot more to talk about. But so here now we see this is now the geocentric nodes around the star point. So Uranus hasn't changed, helio or geocentric, and we've got Venus again sort of straddling both sides, north and south node being there. And again, what I was saying earlier is so the underlined parts here are, of course, the nodes, whereas the other Venus here is the Venus in longitude. And then this is the 2012 transit where we can see that Venus was she was in the 20 minutes of arc Cazimi, right? Being 16 and 50, the what do you call it? The node was at 1610. So that's why she had the transit. And if you remember, the transit was very low on the sun. Do you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't through the middle. It was very much kind of on a corner in a sense. So that's the kind of, that's what we're looking at when we understand the transits. And Mercury still does transits when it crosses its node. I think the next one's in 2032. And interestingly, with Mercury, Ariel, when Mercury's last transit happened, sorry, it wasn't a transit, but it was a nodal, movement across his node was 18 Scorpio was the end of November 2019. I found that very interesting because COVID blossomed very soon after that.
Right, and it was right on Mercury-Mars nodes.
Yes. So again, here we're finding these nodes everywhere. So Ariel, this is,
as I said,
yeah,
transportation and spread like wildfire and it's like, okay, one little speck of this virus, gets out in the air, goes airborne, and it's everywhere before you know it. Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Verena. Put a link to Mark's book. Wonderful. I've got a picture of it coming up. But anyway, so Ariel, you have now. This is
Now you showed
that
your
found.
version of this chart earlier, but this is my version of the chart. But I liked this kite pattern that's for the current Gemini Venus star point. Just showing this is a double wheel showing the planetary nodes on the outside. Now, this is from Solar Fire, and I'm sorry to say that I have not been able to locate, and I do not think Solar Fire provides a way to do the helio nodes or to switch back and forth from helio to geo. I understand Astro Gold does on the Mac,
Well,
but
I
it
had to
doesn't
work
on.
out how to do it. So in order to do that, you have to create the second chart in Helio. That's it. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Oh, okay.
yeah, so, but you have to kind of keep switching back and forward, right? From like when
Yeah,
you've got the
yeah.
chart
It
file.
hasn't become clear to me yet.
Yeah,
I'm kind
yeah,
of sometimes I'm slow at getting, the
that's all right.
technicalities
So
of
yeah,
all
so
this,
this
but
kite
I've been
pattern.
using the Geo. Yeah.
So we've got it with Mars and Neptune. Is that right? Neptune's
Yes.
right. But
If
the
you
again,
if
these are
you
the
take a look at
geocentric things.
what's in the outer wheel, we've got the Neptune node, which between the two systems, Geo and Helio, the outer planets, as we mentioned earlier, don't move very
Mm,
much. They're within a degree or a half a
yeah,
degree of one
yeah.
another between the two systems. So when you see something like Neptune and Uranus included with a configuration like this, it's really part of the collective. It's really an important time in the collective. And then we have Mars's south node, this is Geo, in Libra on the moon south node in Libra right now. So once again, the theme of war,
Mm,
the
mm.
theme of, Mars on the south node of the moon, the south node of Mars on the south node of the moon is bringing up things from the past, old disputes and
Sure
old
is. Yeah,
grievances that people want to act upon in this way.
yeah.
Um, I do feel we're going to come out of this war. Uh, I still have this strong feeling we're going to come out of this war machine mentality, let's say, that the world has been locked into, even though in all of recorded history, there hasn't been one time that there hasn't been a war that's been going on somewhere on the planet. So I'm very hopeful to, it's a very big thing to imagine that we will not have any war in the future, but because it's just been going on for so long. But I do feel like as we get, we're evolving to a place where we just, as a human species, do not want war any longer. We do not want war.
Mm.
And the collective idea of that and the collective dream and hope and prayer for that, when it spreads to
We'll
be
have to
large enough, I think
infiltrate
can overcome.
eventually.
Yes. Yeah. The
Yes.
100th monkey.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It will take a while, but I mean, I couldn't help thinking about how much resentment is building in Gaza for the young kids that will survive to grow up.
Exactly.
And, what will they be, kind of manifesting in 30 years or something, 20 years,
Yeah.
15 years, even young. Gosh.
If they're allowed to grow up, if they're not all
Yeah,
extinguished before they get a chance to grow up. But this is the other thing about war. Whoever the enemy is attacking a nation or a place, the kids are going to grow up as victims of that, and they're going to, obviously they're going to want to strike back.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so it's a perpetuating, it keeps perpetuating itself. It's a cycle, a vicious
yeah,
cycle.
yeah.
So anyway, so
So
where are
you
we
noticed
now?
this
Oh,
as well. Yeah.
later this year, we're having a grand mutable cross, which is picking up the energy of the Venus star point now that we're having in June. But if you look, you'll see Mars, the planet Mars on 16 Gemini, the planet
Oh,
Jupiter
yes,
on
yes.
16 Gemini. They're tightly conjunct. Mars, Jupiter, the urge for war.
Mm, wow.
Exactly. Venus down here, square at 11 Virgo, with the
Yep.
south node of Mercury there. The moon for one day will be, opposite it, and the south node of Uranus, of course, is there permanently. And then we have Saturn up at 17 Pisces. So the big deal this year, later this year, is the Jupiter Saturn square, of course. But Mars comes into it, and they all set off this Venus star point that we're having now, which is in mid Gemini. So it's a really loaded year.
Mm,
This takes place in August. Uh, August is, again, in the US, it's 3 months before the, 2.5 months before the election, when things start getting really heated. Both the Democrats and the Republicans meet and have their conventions at this time and really kind of nominate their candidates and put them out there as, okay, these are the ones, even though we kind of know who the ones are. But do we? Is there some kind of surprise factor coming in here? Or, there's a mutable cross here. Anything could happen. Mutables, as you know, are a little shifty. They don't always do what they say they're going to do. They don't always, I don't
But they
know. There's
hold
this,
probably promise more than others because it can shift into something else, right? Again, we don't know
yeah,
what, but it can shift more likely instead of, we're on that trajectory and it's not going to change, right? So yeah,
yeah. And
interesting. Yeah.
Biden is Sag rising with Gemini in the seventh.
Uh-huh.
Trump is Gemini with all that, with that mutable cross, grand cross right on his sun,
Right.
basically 17, around 21 Gemini. He's got Jupiter, Uranus at 17 Gemini.
I like the
And
Saturn
then,
squaring that for him.
yes, well, and it has been actually this year, it's been squaring. Saturn's come into squaring as well as Mars right now. So, he's sitting in court right now, where he's liable to
I
have
don't
to
think
cough up
Saturn's
a
been
lot
there
of
yet.
money.
Saturn hasn't been at 17 yet, or exactly 17 yet. So
Yeah,
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 that's interesting.
yeah,
All right,
yeah,
watch this space. And now we've got a few charts here of people that are, again, have been in the limelight. We haven't heard of Edward Snowden, or have we? I don't know that we have, but have a look at what, his chart here. He's got a 12 Gemini rising, which of course means the north node of Uranus is right there. And the star points, were targeting him over those years as well. Um,
yeah. And his ascendant is absolutely exactly
yeah.
opposite the US chart of
Oh,
12
okay,
Sag
as well.
rising.
Yes, of course.
So, he exposed a lot of secrets about the United States government, and he's a whistleblower. But I was just showing that the whistleblower dynamic, like you were showing for Julian Assange, here
Yeah.
we have in Edward Snowden's chart. He's a Gemini sun and Gemini ascendant, which is, I have to speak the truth. I have to get this information
Yes.
out.
Yeah.
He's got a Scorpio moon, which is, like, this is secret stuff that nobody knows about. And I just
Assange has
discovered
as
it.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Assange has a
Yeah.
Scorpio dynamic too with the Gemini. So, here it is. And I do think it is, the Gemini Scorpio can definitely be the signature of a whistleblower. Certainly doesn't have to be that intense or dramatic, but somebody who's going to dig underneath the surface and research what's there, and then talk about it, share,
Exactly.
dissemination of the information.
Yeah. Data,
He's
collected
got,
data.
yeah, and I don't really know. Um, yeah, somebody's just saying Boeing whistleblowers will be coming out over the next few months. Yeah, this year is
That's what you
again the
can expect.
whistleblower
Yeah. Yeah.
dynamic
Yeah.
in energy in happening right
Yeah.
there in the
Truth
sky.
to
But
be
I wanted to
revealed.
show the nodes and how it's all connected. Yes, for the freedom, for the greater good of
Yeah.
all. And
Um,
also, what is Uranus but the rebel, who challenges the status quo and says, no, that doesn't work for us. We're gonna
and
expose it. We're
and
gonna
as
we're gonna
Tannis
fight
always
against that.
related, Uranus to Prometheus. So the one that, is
Yes,
punished for his ignition of truth, and for the good of humanity is punished. And I mean, we see that more and more, like, the two Australians that I sort of showed before as well. So now you've got a few examples. This is JFK's with all the eighth house kind of connections to his chart.
yeah. Yeah, well, I was wondering, okay, he's got a sun Venus conjunction in his natal chart, but it's pretty wide. It's 9 degrees apart. It's in that area because he's, as you can see, he's an evening star. So it's past that 20-day period you were talking about earlier of the
Well,
evening
it's
star.
still, yeah, it's past that, but it's still under the beams. Well, it's just there, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But then when you look at the nodes of the planets, it brings Venus so much closer. Because the node of Venus is 11 Gemini, so it's sort of sitting at the midpoint between his sun Venus, and of course Uranus is there too. He was so charismatic. He was everybody, wanted to treat him more like a movie star than a president. It was like he attracted so much attention wherever he went, and he and his wife, his beautiful wife, and wanting to be photographed. And it was almost like they were in that sense. But I was showing the Uranian and Venusian is such a powerful attraction force of charisma. We say when Venus and Uranus are conjoined in a chart or have a strong aspect, that there's a lot of personal charisma to that. The south node of Mars is right on his ascendant.
Yeah.
The north node of Chiron is there. That south node of Mars there really is kind of a life-threatening aspect when you think about it. It's like some type of violence is going to come into the life. The ascendant is the point of life, the point of birth. So I saw that, and I was looking at that, and the north node of Saturn is up there, and Pluto is close to his midheaven. With the south nodes of Saturn and Pluto, it is IC, a lot of family secrets and family background, kinds of family business and so forth in the Kennedy clan. But mainly I wanted to show that Venus Uranus
combination,
nodal positioning in his own chart being very strong. And then if you look at his Mercury and Mars natally, are right at the Mercury Mars, the Helio Mercury and Mars of as we showed on that chart earlier. It doesn't show in this one because this is Geo. But if you remember those degrees, and they're not that hard to remember, around 19 and 20, Taurus and Scorpio, you'll see that his own Mercury and Mars were on there. So he again is somebody who was so connected to the planetary nodes, which is the world, the position of importance in the world in terms of his effect on the world.
And he did want to change something, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
He did want to change something. We won't get into that, but it was to do with the bank, signing a bank, something, I don't know.
He wanted to fight the corruption, the mafia, the whole, the way the government has been controlled by outside forces, and he got killed for it. And, as so many people do that are trying to be whistleblowers or try to buck the system, try to buck a corrupt system. Again, a Promethean bringer of fire. Wanting to bring fire to mankind. Not that he didn't have his own personal secrets, but as you can see in this chart, he certainly did.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Wow. I'm just looking at the 16 Gemini. I think Elon Musk has got 16 Gemini Venus. I didn't put his chart in. I put his chart in for another thing I'm doing, but anyway, look at Elon Musk. I mean, he's a a Promethean in a sense, but also always in trouble as well, and a troublemaker, isn't he?
And his ascendant is I think 13 Cancer, right on the US sun, but that degree is also the Jupiter north node. So he has become, in a way, he's become Zeus.
Yes, right. That's right. I've got the power to do everything. I mean, the other person that's got a Jupiter sun, I think the Jupiter on their sun is Taylor Swift, which is, or the moon. Hang on. No, she's a
The moon.
Sagittarius. It must
She's
be
got
her
a
moon.
Cancer moon.
She's got a
Yeah,
Cancer moon is on
moon.
Jupiter, and she's
Yeah.
so, giving and giving out everything. And, so I mean, there's a lot of work you can do with any of the nodes, again, but I just,
Oh, yeah.
as Ariel, you're saying, is just remember you'll get to know them, see those tables. It's like, when we first started learning about terms and dignities and stuff, you'd have tables of them in front of you so you'd remember. It's the same with this, isn't it? The five
Yeah.
points are
And
really
it's
easy.
also the same with the Venus star.
Yeah,
If you learn
yeah.
the positions of the 5 transiting points of the star in any given time, you'll immediately be able to look at a chart and go, oh, boom, boom,
Yeah,
boom.
yeah,
They've
yeah.
got all
And I
these things
see those,
connected to the star.
yeah. And then I see them as like, oh my gosh, their ascendant is on the next star point, or that that's a
Yeah,
focus to talk
right.
about. Stuff like that. So, and then again, whatever you see, you will then be automatically connecting the 4-year cycles and go, oh, what happened 8 years ago? Can you bring that up? And then there's always these incredible revelations 8 years ago or 4
Right.
years ago. So Marilyn's, she's got the
She's also a
node,
Gemini.
yes,
Yeah,
with
she's
the
also a Gemini. Yeah.
yeah. So the any Geminis are going to have these nodes, but then also very much in relation to her ascendant descendant as well.
Well, what I found fascinating about that was the
Which is
Neptune,
Neptune.
because she
Yeah.
became such a,
Yeah.
projection of female beauty. And, I mean, nobody has surpassed her really in all these decades since her life was ended in the early 60s. She became this icon of feminine, so then there again, she doesn't have Sun Venus
So
conjunct like Kennedy did, but she has Sun Mercury, but there's the Venus node right on it,
yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there's Mars and Venus's node conjunct, not on the chart, but on each other. So there's another way to look at the nodes when the two inner planet nodes are conjunct one another because they move, and they're in very close proximity. So this male female energy in Taurus, so sensual, so iconic. But there on the ascendant descent, I think the main point here I wanted to make was that Neptune's nodes, and in terms of just this universal projection of her as because I always kind of questioned, I always wanted to look at her chart and go, why? What was it about her that made, there were a lot of beautiful women, blonde and beautiful women of that era that came forth. And why was she the one that was singled out, in that particular way? And, I feel like it's here in the chart.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
of course the helio nodes are actually more on there. Well, they're 11 or whatever, 12. But yeah,
Yeah.
they're very
Yeah.
close. Yeah.
Right.
Amazing,
Right.
amazing. Now you've got Princess Diana in here as well.
Yeah. I was just looking at charts, going through my files and seeing, how are the nodes affecting them? And
Yeah.
the point I wanted to make on this is the north node of Jupiter is exactly on her natal sun. Okay, exactly.
Right. So she,
Yeah.
yes. And she was,
Yeah.
well, like
She was
we were talking
also,
about Taylor Swift with her moon there. Right.
yeah, nobody can keep their eyes off of her, the cameras of the world, the paparazzi. The north node of Venus conjunct her Mercury.
The Chiron up the top
South
here.
node of Saturn conjunct her Saturn. So, this whole traditional family that she married into, and the queen and the royal family. I think so much of as this Capricorn Saturn kind of thing, which the queen had in her own chart too. Saturn at the midheaven and Capricorn rising, I believe. Her Chiron South node is at 1 Taurus. That's exactly Queen Elizabeth's sun. It's Charles's moon and Philip's Venus Star Point. Those three, I've done
Yeah.
work on those three before in
Oh,
the
gee.
Venus Star groupings, and they're all a tight little, sun, moon, and VSP, a little family system. but her Chiron South Node came into that. So she came in to heal some very deep wounds in her life through being in that family.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Wow, it gives another level of understanding it all as well. You've added this one as well, Ariel, just about Pluto's nodes and how they've shifted
Yeah,
over
I wanted to
centuries.
bring to the attention of people that Pluto is a very slow moving node, and it stays in a sign for 2,000 years, and almost like an age, a processional age. And Pluto's node began in Cancer Capricorn in the year 500, and it will be there until 2500.
Mm,
And so, even though Pluto's moved out of Capricorn, and while it was in Capricorn, it was, obviously on its own
on its
nodes.
nose, yeah.
When it's in, every time it goes to Cancer and Capricorn, it visits its own nodes. And, you have some pretty big things going on, very big Plutonian energies going on. But the idea that it's going to still be in Cancer and Capricorn till 2500, to me, says that this Cancer Capricorn axis, especially the later degrees in the 20s till the end of the sign, are going to be pretty important. Anybody's chart that you're looking at with these later degrees of Cancer Capricorn is still going to be having it on the Pluto node, and that the Pluto node is still kind of establishing a larger framework for the world. I like to call it the world consciousness, the consciousness of the world. Saturn's node's also in Capricorn and Cancer, which I call like the spine of the world tree. This might be the world tree. Saturn could be the spine, the spinal cord, but that there's still going to be those Cancer Capricorn themes that are going to be let's say, taking rulership of the world, that kind of thing. And so we look at the US, a lot of people are predicting the demise of the United States anytime soon now. And certainly they're wrestling with a lot of, they're having a lot of power struggles, and they're in a very vulnerable time right now. But their sun in Cancer, their Pluto in Capricorn is still with Pluto. I think the component of power that Pluto holds in the world is still, within the realm of the US chart. So I don't see it, as Mark Twain said, the rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated. The US may be in trouble and may be going through difficult times, but it's still here. It's still going to stay standing. There's a power component there. There's a Plutonian component
Yeah,
there.
definitely.
Keeping
Yeah,
it.
of course. It will just, again, transform into something different. Well, not completely different, but evolve. That's it. So this is something I found, the first atomic test in 1945. Of course, the big movie Oppenheimer was all about that. Most recently, look where Uranus is, 15 Gemini, and look where the node is with Mars. Amazing.
There you go.
Now, I know when Hiroshima bomb was dropped, it was a Uranus-Mars conjunction in the zodiac, but
Yeah.
but I have never, hadn't looked at this. So yeah, look at that. Amazing. So
this is more like the birth of the bomb, the first
well,
test.
the big test in Texas. And so the look at Jupiter right on the ascendant there, or the node of Jupiter, sorry. And then we have Pluto, which is a 9 Leo, right on the node of Neptune. anyway, it's quite interesting, isn't it, that that's there.
Well, it is,
Yeah.
and why is it even important now? Because this Venus star point Gemini is picking up that Mars Uranus and
Well,
Venus
there's
Uranus in both these
missiles,
charts.
the
And
weapons
look
that
at what
they've bought.
Oppenheimer did just a month ago or so. Oppenheimer swept the Oscars with so many awards, and that
Well, the
whole
last
movie
star
was really
point in
about
Leo.
this.
Yeah, the last
Yeah,
star point in Leo. Well, at the Oscars, yes. So yes, of course. So
yeah.
that's all very
But a
relevant.
preview for this star
Yeah,
point coming
yeah,
up with all these, yeah,
yeah.
as well.
So that's also how you connect the last star point with this point, again, with this kind of theme crossover, which is just so fascinating to watch. Now, this is the USA chart that I showed before as we talked about the Venus star point going down. And then I've put the helio nodes of 1776 on the outside. And as we can see, Uranus nodes are right across the ascendant, descendant. And Ariel, you said this as we were getting ready for this session, that there is a belief that it was chosen for 12 degrees Sagittarius rising because of the nodes and the independent, like the symbolism, the story of independence from Britain and all that kind of thing. Yeah. Makes
To
sense.
amplify the magnitude of the Uranian principle that was ruling the day.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, we have a message here. Please stop talking simultaneously. Very difficult to see what you were saying. Okay, they must be reading it. Okay, sorry. Sorry.
And then
We just have so much to say.
well, it's not so easy on webinars when you are sharing information. So we do our best. Thank you.
Yeah, we're sorry. Well, anyway.
And then the helio nodes on the USA chart for 2024. So here we have, the 14, as we've talked about, Gemini and so on. So again, something to really kind of keep an eye on. And let's just, the highlight of, let's say, the turmoil that is going on. It's so unsettled. Everything's so unsettled. There's a lot of people going through a lot of trauma in so many ways. I'm not saying in the US in that sense, but overall, like Venus, Uranus node. I mean, evolutionary astrologers relate Uranus to trauma. So, you know,
Well, it can certainly can be, definitely.
yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Separation and being, I mean, what's those stories, I mean, in Gaza, children being delivered, from dead mothers. So, oh my gosh, that's very Uranian, isn't it? Like getting taken out of, like separated. Anyway, there's so many sort of things that we can sort of add here. And this is the chart of Israel. Now, if we can see back in 1948, Israel's helio node. So again, I've just got the helio nodes here. Chiron is near the ascendant. And what am I doing here? Sorry, I can't top there. Oh, I didn't put, and this is the helio as well for now. Okay, so we've got, as you were talking about, Uranus and Mercury nodes near the sun. There's not completely on there, but it is, 8th house, Uranus, Venus in the 8th house, Gemini. But the interesting one here is Neptune on Pluto's node, Neptune's node on Pluto. And, when I saw this, I thought, okay, well, we're all kind of going through this, well, not the experience of what people are experiencing in Gaza, but, I mean, I just heard of an Australian flotilla of people going over with, like loads of food and help and aid and medicine and ambulances, to go past the warships and, get to Gaza to help, because there's such a delay in the way there's help being delivered.
Yes,
To that need
exactly.
it. Yeah.
Exactly.
And
it makes the rest of us kind of helpless in terms of how do we contribute? How do we how do we send aid over there in any form when it's
Yeah.
potentially never going to get there because it's going to be bombed or destroyed or taken away before it even gets
It
to where
gets
you're
there.
going.
And
So
so
it's a
that's
very
really a
frustrating thing.
Neptune thing, isn't it? We all want to do, and we're involved. We're so upset and sad and mad about it. Anyway, it's just showing up there in the Israel chart. Anyway, we'll finish soon, but this is really interesting. Also, Ariel, if we remember, Mars was retrograding Gemini at the end of 2022, right? And two really
Yeah.
interesting things happened was that we got ChatGPT launched, right?
Yeah.
So,
Wow. Yeah.
and this, of course, during that time, the retrograde, of course, went over these nodes that we've just been talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then also the breakthrough, if we remember the first fusion ignition, the energy, oh my God, everyone, they got excited because the mission worked in a sense that fusion energy is a thing and we can make it work, although, there's a long way to go. But it happened during that time, which I just think is absolutely fascinating. And of course, it also went past 8 degrees of Sagittarius, or the retrograde stopped at 8 Sagittarius, which is Antares and Aldebaran, the bright red stars, which are very much associated with the nuclear axis, which many astrologers have talked about over the years. So that's interesting, just with those happenings, isn't it? So
And they're associated with Mars as well. Yeah.
and Mars, but I know Ed Tamplin and a few other astrologers have called it the nuclear axis. Anyway,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Mhm.
keeping an eye on that. And then the Great Attractor is 14 Sagittarius. This is a little bit off topic, but it's still relevant because we're talking about this axis, right? Now, the
Yeah.
Great Attractor is the region of gravitation, so a huge gravitational point. We've probably mostly heard about the galactic center, which is a closer center that we gravitate around. This is now how loads of galaxies gravitate around not just our galactic center, which is the Milky Way, but the Milky Way is one of the hundreds of galaxies that gravitate around this Great Attractor. So anyway, the south node of Uranus is 14 Sagittarius, and I've just added a few interesting little things here. Again, 14 Sagittarius, Gemini. Elizabeth Taylor was often called the first big influencer because of the jewelry she wore, and this, the people that loaned her the stuff to wear. And of course, that's become, the thing, like everyone, all the influencers are collecting whatever clothes, jewelry, whatever. And so anyway, she's got 14 Sag. She has a 14 Sag rising, and Kim Kardashian has a 14 Sag descendant. Although, anyway, so big influences, keep those things in mind. Snowden, we've talked about, and astrologers. I'm sure there's many of them, but Rick Levine has 14 Gemini ascendant. So, and he's very, let's say, cosmic astrologer, very much the
Yeah.
quantum understanding, all that kind of
And
stuff.
what's so funny about Rick, he's a great astrologer, by the way. I mean, his information is so amazing. He's very he comes from a Uranian mind. His that ascendant that you're saying is at 14 Sag and Gemini with the nodes of Uranus right on that axis. Have you ever seen the way he dresses? He's always wearing
Well, yeah, cosmic shirts,
shirts
yes, that he's
with
painted.
planets and stars and galactic bursts of
Yeah,
energy
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
comets and things. He definitely is like
Yes, he's
the embodiment
embodying
of
that. Yeah,
those
yeah,
Uranian nodes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And of course, we love Rick, so I'm not making fun, but the
Yeah,
Eisenstein hair kind of,
exactly. Yeah, no. I think he's dressed to part. He's dressing
the
exactly to
part.
script
Yeah,
here.
yeah,
The
yeah,
way
yeah.
Uranus would say,
And
okay,
it's
this is
interesting.
your
Yeah, because I
wardrobe.
don't think he's got nothing else on the ascendant, if I remember. So it's
I don't
yeah,
know his
yeah,
chart, but
yeah,
this is
yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, anyway. So that's it, guys. I just kind of ending with this chart and then the helio nodes on the outside, in a sense of, how much more we can sort of learn and discover in regard to, 19 Mars, 18, for all of these placements, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I mean, it's interesting.
So,
Yeah, we haven't done a lot of work, and with Mark, in our session, he just uses conjunctions. So, we haven't done a lot of things with oppositions or squares or what have you. His main work is with conjunctions, and he says that he will go out to 3 degrees, but the closer the kind of he focuses on those, just to follow in his footsteps, because he's done a lot of research with it. And so,
yeah, otherwise there would be so much. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So you want to keep
And we
yeah,
thank Mark Jones. I thank him totally for inspiring. There's his book,
yeah,
inspiring this idea of, I mean, the planetary nodes have been in the back burner of my mind for a while, but I've been so busy with the Venus star that, it's just been on that back shelf. And suddenly now, 20 years ago is when I first got the download for the Venus star, 2004, April. And here we are, April 2024, 20 years later. And
yeah.
suddenly
Wow. Well, that's
now,
your book.
planetary node, yeah, that first book, the print book, that was the result of that. But I just wanted to, thank Mark for doing all the research. That book of his has tremendous amounts of research in it, from the nodes,
Yeah,
the planetary nodes, and how they have shaped culture and people and events,
yeah.
in our
Well,
world.
we'll
Yeah,
do something else on it, because when we love a subject, we find the time to actually look into it more, don't we? So I hope you all have been liking looking into this with us. And before we go, Ariel and I are going to do a class together in Greece, in a month or so. Actually, it is about a month.
yeah. May
Yeah.
22nd.
Yeah. So if you would like to join us, it is online. It's going to concentrate now on, we're going to pick 5 charts from the group that registers to join us, and do, Venus star work for the group, 20 minutes each or something like that, in a Q&A. So if you'd like to join us from that, I think you can learn a lot in a very sort of closer look at charts, because we've done so much work with the the cycle and the various ways to use it, and what have you. So yeah, register to join us there. We're having a bit of are we having an early bird sale? Yes, till April.
Yeah,
Registration till April the 25th. Hang on, that's soon.
that's today. So maybe
Oh,
we need to extend that a
yeah,
little bit.
I'll extend it for a week or so, or till the weekend coming after
Maybe
this
until
one.
like May 8th or 9th or
Yeah, okay,
something.
so I'll
Yeah.
change it on the website, but if you want to join us, please log in for that, or it's on the website details under masterclasses. And then it's really exciting to actually come to a culmination, as I was saying before, in a sense, not that we're going to stop doing Venus work, but we have gathered so much information, and I put it all together in all the sessions that we've done every 9.5 months over the last, 8 years or so. And it looks like a book. To me, it feels like, it's a book, although it's videos and PDFs and notes that you can buy, of 44.5 hours of material from Ariel, from myself, from Gemini Brett, from Adam Gainsberg, and then there's a few other sessions that we've got. Kelly Hunter has joined us, Patricia Walsh has joined us, and Adam Summer has joined us. But otherwise, it's mainly Ariel, myself have done the most. Ariel, myself, and Gemini, and then Ariel, myself, Gemini, and Adam have in that kind of order have done all of this. So if you want like the volume and want to take on the study of, again, how to work with the Venus star and understand it in its different sort of guises, like the Aries star point, the Capricorn one, the Scorpio. Do go to the website, and we've kind of kept the price as like half the price of what it would be to buy all of these. And so really it's like a book, like I said. So yeah, I'm excited about that, Ariel.
Yeah, thank you, Julia, for putting it all together. That was a amazing amount of work that you put together, and I remember almost
Took a
all of
bit.
those
Yes.
presentations that we did. Also, I would like to encourage people to, I have a certification course in the Venus Star Point training. So please go to my website and check it out and become one of our practitioners, our teachers and practitioners at the Venus Star Point. The more people we get around the world doing this, the more awareness and more new examples and more
Yes.
case studies.
We
It just
we do
helps.
find more, don't we? Yeah, we find out more and more.
Yeah,
I mean, in these sessions, Gemini did the Venus star points through the deacons. We've talked about the greater cycle of the Venus star points, through the ages. In a sense, we've done lots of journeys, haven't we, in all these
the
sessions?
chakras,
The
the
chakras,
gates,
the
the
moon
Inanna
gates.
gates, the
Yeah.
gates of Inanna's descent and ascent. Yeah,
Yeah. So
all of
again,
them.
you'll get the whole kind of gist of the whole package pretty much. So, and then of
Right, right.
course, there's also the joining of the CIA, which we do a lot of work, not out like this for free. We love to do free stuff as well. But every 2 weeks or so, we have a webinar with a great astrologer like Mark Jones or Ariel, and I've spelt these things wrong. I'm sorry, I was a bit in a hurry at the last minute there. But coming up this weekend is Simple Rectification with MJ Patterson. Now, if you don't know rectification, it is something very valuable to know how to do just quickly, in a sense, so that you're looking at the right, even for your own chart. And Jupiter in Gemini, look at my spelling here. Sorry, I was in a hurry. With agent, this is in code, everyone. It's in code.
Yeah,
Um,
really.
Jupiter in Gemini on May the 10th. And then, of course, with Ariel, we've got the workshop and 20% off till May the 8th, let's say. Okay, so thanks everyone for joining us. I'll stop the share now. I'm just reading some of the comments and seeing the names of who was here. Wonderful to have you. Sue and Ninka and Anita, Asuman. Wonderful. So anyway, the recording will be available. It is on YouTube already, or was streaming live there. So do share it around. Tell people about this amazing star and what's coming up. Give us feedback, leave comments. We love that. Thank you, Ariel, for doing this with me.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us. We've led you down the rabbit hole of the Venus star points for a while now, and for today. And now we're leading you down another rabbit hole of the planetary nodes. So thank you for taking the trip with us.
Yeah, I'm just
We're
going
always
to put
glad to
some
have
links
you.
in the chat while we're still here for anyone that wants to. And of course, there's also our Time Lords magazine, which is full of wonderful information and writers and so on. So, do look at that. That's also for free. So here's a link to the book. Oh, I'm just calling it the book, the Venus Star Files. And then what else was I sharing? Oh, yes, our class as well.
Like the X files.
Like the yes.
Or the Y files, if anybody's into the Y
The
files.
Venus Files. The Venus Files.
We have the Venus
Masterclass.
files.
Yeah. And if you want to do, more personal look in the sense of learning how to read it in a chart, then join our class with Ariel. So thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful week. Have a wonderful day, and we will see you next time. Yes, and
Thank you
Ariel,
all for being
I will
here.
see you in
And we'll
Greece.
see you in Greece. I'll see you in Greece soon.
How exciting. Thank you. See you, everyone.
All right. Okay. Take care.
Bye.